Spirit, the wild mustang deemed too dangerous to exist, had violently rejected 3 trainers and waited in his death row pen for morning's lethal injection. 16-year-old Emma, paralyzed and bitter in her wheelchair, demanded to see him alone before his final hour. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and comment on where you're watching from. Let's get started. The thunderous sound of hooves against hard earth echoed through the canyon as a magnificent black stallion raced across the open plains of Montana. His mane flowed like dark water in the wind, muscles rippling beneath a coat that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Spirit, as the local ranchers had come to call him, was a legend in these parts, a wild mustang that had evaded capture for years, a symbol of freedom that roamed the vast wilderness as if he owned it. But today, Spirit wasn't running for the joy of it. The distant sound of engines and men's voices drove him forward, pushing him to his limits. A government roundup was underway, and the Bureau of Land Management had set their sights on the Mustang herds that had roamed these lands for generations. Spirit led his small band of mares and foals, desperately trying to guide them to safety. He'd avoided these human traps before, sensing danger long before it arrived. But this time, the helicopters came without warning, swooping down from the cloudless sky, their mechanical roar scattering his herd in terror. Spirit fought with all his might, charging at the low-flying machines, trumpeting his defiance. But one by one, his family was driven into the hidden corrals. The magnificent stallion reared up against the metal fences once they had him surrounded, his eyes wild with fury and fear. His front hooves crashed against the barriers, but the trap was too well built, too strong even for his powerful body. "That's the one they call Spirit," said James Parker, the lead wrangler, wiping sweat from his brow as he watched the stallion pace furiously in the holding pen. "Never seen a Mustang fight like that. He's going to be trouble." The other men nodded in agreement. They'd all heard stories about this particular horse, how he'd outwitted previous roundup attempts, how he'd never let a human close, how some of the old-timers believed he understood human speech with those intelligent eyes that seemed to look right through you. "Wild as they come," muttered another wrangler. "Too wild. No one's ever going to break that one." For 3 days, Spirit remained in the temporary holding facility at the base of the mountains. Unlike the other horses who gradually grew calmer, accepting hay and water from their captors, the black stallion refused to eat or drink. He charged anyone who came near, teeth bared, eyes blazing with a fierce intelligence that unsettled even the most experienced handlers. When the time came to load the Mustangs for transport to the holding facility, where they would be prepared for auction, it took 6 men to force Spirit into the trailer. Even then, he fought every step, leaving 2 handlers with bruised ribs and 1 with a dislocated shoulder. "That horse is the devil himself," cursed the injured wrangler as he clutched his arm in pain. At the main BLM facility in Wyoming, Spirit's reputation preceded him. The trainers took one look at the wild stallion and shook their heads. Most Mustangs could be gentled with patience and time, but there was something different about this one. A wildness that ran too deep, a spirit that refused to be broken. "He's untrainable," declared Marcus Wilson, the head trainer, after watching Spirit attack the corral fence for the 5th time that day. "Too dangerous to adopt out. We've given him 2 weeks and he's only gotten worse." The facility director frowned, looking at the paperwork on his desk. "What are our options?" "Normally, we'd send him to long-term holding, but with his temperament..." Marcus let the words hang in the air. Everyone knew what happened to horses deemed unadoptable and dangerous. Resources were limited, and decisions had to be made. "Give him until the next auction," the director finally said. "If no one takes him, we'll have to make the call." Word about the untamable black stallion spread through the ranching community. Some came just to see him, this wild creature that refused to surrender his spirit to captivity. They watched as he paced his pen, muscles tense, eyes alert, his very presence commanding respect. "That's not a horse," said one old rancher, shaking his head. "That's a force of nature." A few brave trainers tried their hand with spirit, drawn by the challenge. One by one they gave up, some left with injuries, others with dented pride, but all with the same conclusion: this horse would never accept a human master. By the day of the auction, Spirit's fate seemed sealed. He stood at the back of his pen, watching the humans with a gaze that held neither fear nor submission, only an unwavering defiance. The auctioneer barely tried to sell him, reading out the warning labels attached to his file. "Extremely dangerous. Not recommended for adoption. Prospective buyers assume all risk." No hands went up. No one wanted to take on a lost cause, a horse that might never be ridden, that might hurt someone, that would cost money and time with no guarantee of success. "Going once?" the auctioneer called, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Going twice." Miles away, in a modest farmhouse on the outskirts of Silver Creek, Montana, 16-year-old Emma Reynolds sat in her wheelchair by the window, watching rain trace patterns down the glass. The accident that had taken her ability to walk 3 years ago had also taken her father, leaving her and her mother to run their small horse rescue farm alone. Before the accident, Emma had been a promising young rider, fearless on horseback, with dreams of competing professionally one day. Now her room was filled with ribbons and trophies from a life that seemed to belong to someone else, someone from a different story. "Emma?" Her mother, Sarah, appeared in the doorway. "Dinner's ready." Emma nodded, turning her wheelchair away from the window. "I'll be right there." Sarah hesitated, then stepped into the room. "I got a call from Mike at the BLM facility. They've got a new group of Mustangs in from the roundup." Emma's expression remained unchanged. Once, news of new horses would have sent her racing to the barn, eager to see the wild creatures, to be the first to touch them, to start the gentle process of earning their trust. Now, she merely nodded again. "He mentioned one in particular," Sarah continued, her voice careful. "A black stallion. Says he's never seen anything like him. No one can get near him." "So?" Emma's voice was flat, uninterested. "So, they're going to put him down if no one takes him. Tomorrow." For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Emma's face, a shadow of the passion that had once defined her. "What do you want me to do about it? I can't exactly train a wild Mustang from this chair." Sarah knelt beside her daughter's wheelchair, taking her hands. "Maybe not the way you used to. But Emma, you haven't been to the barn in months. The therapy horses miss you. I miss seeing you with them." Emma pulled her hands away. "I'm not the horse girl anymore, Mom. That was before." "You don't have to ride to connect with horses," Sarah said gently. "Your heart hasn't changed, even if your circumstances have." Emma turned back to the window, effectively ending the conversation. But after her mother left, she found herself thinking about the black stallion, alone in a strange place, surrounded by humans who feared him, who had already decided his fate. Something about that resonated within her, touching a part of her soul that had been dormant since the day metal twisted around her legs and changed her life forever. That night, she dreamed of running wild across open plains, the wind in her hair, hooves thundering beneath her. In the dream, she wasn't in a wheelchair. She wasn't broken. She was free. When she woke, there was a decision in her heart, one she couldn't fully explain even to herself. "Mom," she said at breakfast, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "I want to see him, the black stallion." Sarah looked up, surprise and hope mingling in her eyes. "Are you sure?" Emma nodded, a determination setting into her features that had been absent for too long. "Yes, before they..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "I just need to see him." The drive to the BLM facility took just over an hour, but for Emma, It felt like crossing a threshold into her past. Each mile brought back memories of horse shows and training sessions, of early mornings in the barn and late nights studying equine medicine. She had once known exactly who she was and where she belonged in the world. Now she felt like a stranger even to herself. Sarah glanced at her daughter occasionally as she drove, noting the tension in Emma's shoulders, the way her hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, secured in the modified van. It had been months since Emma had shown interest in anything related to horses. This black stallion, whoever he was, had somehow pierced the protective shell Emma had built around herself. "Mike says he'll meet us there," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "He's holding off on any decisions until we've had a chance to see the horse." Emma nodded, her gaze fixed on the landscape rushing past. "What's his name?" "The stallion? I don't think he has one officially. The wranglers have been calling him Spirit." A small smile, the first in what seemed like forever, touched Emma's lips. "That fits from what you've told me." The BLM facility came into view, a sprawling complex of corrals and metal buildings surrounded by high fences. Dozens of wild horses milled about in the larger enclosures, their coats dusty from the dry Wyoming earth. Sarah parked in the visitors area, and Mike, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and calloused hands, was already waiting for them. "Sarah," he greeted, then turned to Emma with a warm smile. "And Emma, it's been too long. Good to see you, kiddo." Emma nodded, suddenly self-conscious in her wheelchair. Mike had known her since she was a little girl, had watched her ride fearlessly, had praised her natural connection with even the most difficult horses. Now she felt exposed, vulnerable under his gaze. "Where is he?" she asked, wanting to redirect attention away from herself. Mike's expression turned serious. "In the isolation pen at the back. Fair warning, he's not like any Mustang I've handled before. There's something different about this one." As they made their way through the facility, Emma could feel the eyes of the workers on her. She knew most of them from before, and their pitying glances made her skin crawl. She focused instead on the horses they passed, noting their conditions, their behaviors, the way they responded to human presence. This was familiar territory, a language she still understood even if she could no longer participate in the way she once had. And then they turned a corner, and Emma saw him. The black stallion stood alone in a corner pen, separate from the other horses. He was even more magnificent than Emma had imagined, tall and powerfully built, with a coat that seemed to absorb the sunlight. But it was his eyes that caught and held her attention, dark, intelligent eyes that watched their approach with a wariness that bordered on contempt. "That's Spirit," Mike said unnecessarily. "Been here 2 weeks and no one can get within 10 feet of him without risking life and limb. He's taken down 3 experienced trainers already." As if to demonstrate, the stallion pinned his ears back and bared his teeth, pawing at the ground in a clear warning. "We've tried everything," Mike continued. "Slow approach, food rewards, leaving him be to settle in. Nothing works. He won't eat if humans are present. Won't let anyone touch him. Just keeps fighting and fighting until he exhausts himself." Emma wheeled herself closer to the fence, ignoring her mother's murmured warning. The stallion's eyes tracked her movement, his body tense and ready to charge if she came too near. "He's scared," Emma said softly. Mike gave a dry laugh. "That horse isn't scared of anything, Emma. That's the problem. Most wild horses act out of fear, and once they learn humans aren't a threat, they settle down. This one, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not afraid. He hates us." But Emma shook her head, seeing what the others couldn't. "No, look at his eyes. There's fear there beneath the anger. He's scared of being trapped, of losing his freedom, of being broken." She moved her wheelchair parallel to the fence, keeping a respectful distance but positioning herself where the stallion could see her clearly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she simply sat still and quiet, her eyes level with his. "Emma, what are you doing?" Sarah asked nervously. "Letting him see me," Emma replied without breaking eye contact with the horse. "All of me." The minutes stretched on. The stallion remained wary, but he didn't charge or retreat. He watched Emma with those intense eyes, as if trying to understand what this strange human, half flesh, half metal and wheels, wanted from him. "I've never seen him this calm with someone so close," Mike whispered to Sarah. Emma barely heard them. She was engaged in a silent conversation with the stallion, a wordless exchange that transcended the barriers between them. In his eyes, she recognized something kindred, a spirit that refused to be defined by limitations, by others' expectations of what was possible. "I want to try working with him," Emma said suddenly, her voice stronger and more decisive than it had been in months. "What?" Sarah's shock was evident. "Emma, honey, be reasonable. This horse is dangerous. Even professional trainers couldn't—" "I'm not talking about training him in the traditional sense," Emma interrupted. "I want to give him a chance, at our farm, where he can have space and time and choice." Mike and Sarah exchanged concerned glances. "Emma," Mike began gently, "I know you've worked wonders with difficult horses before, but that was before I ended up in this chair." Emma finished for him, a hint of the old fire flashing in her eyes. "Maybe that's exactly why I can help him. I know what it's like to have your freedom taken away, to have people look at you and only see limitations." Her words hung in the air, powerful in their truth. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, recognizing the daughter she'd feared was gone forever. "It would be an enormous risk," Mike said, but there was a thoughtful note in his voice. "The financial responsibility alone, we'll figure it out," Sarah said, surprising herself. "If Emma thinks she can reach him, I believe her." Emma looked back at the stallion, who hadn't moved, his gaze still fixed on her with that strange mixture of defiance and curiosity. "He deserves a chance," she said quietly. "Just like I did after the accident." Mike rubbed his jaw, considering. "I'll have to clear it with my superiors. There would be paperwork, liability waivers, and if he proves too dangerous—" "I understand," Emma said, "but please let me try." As they discussed the logistics, Emma remained focused on the stallion. For a brief moment he stepped closer to the fence, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. There was still wariness in his posture, still the wild defiance that had made others give up on him. But there was something else too, a flicker of interest, of recognition perhaps. "I see you," Emma whispered, too low for the others to hear. "And you see me too, don't you? We're both broken in ways they don't understand, both trapped in bodies that don't work the way they're supposed to." The stallion tossed his head, as if in response to her words. "But we're still here," Emma continued, "still fighting. And maybe, just maybe, we can help each other remember what it feels like to be free." For the first time in 3 years, Emma felt a spark of purpose ignite within her. She didn't know if she could help this wild, angry creature. She didn't know if the connection she sensed was real or merely a projection of her own longing. But she knew with sudden clarity that she had to try, for his sake and for her own. The paperwork took a week to process, a week during which Emma found herself coming back to life. She spent hours researching wild horse behavior, refreshing her knowledge of equine psychology, and preparing their farm for Spirit's arrival. The specialized round pen needed reinforcing, the paddock fencing had to be checked for weak spots, and a separate shelter needed to be built where the stallion could feel secure without being confined. Emma directed these preparations from her wheelchair, a notebook balanced on her lap, her voice clear and confident as she instructed the 2 ranch hands her mother had hired for the heavier work. The men, Luis and Hank, exchanged glances occasionally, their expressions a mixture of respect and concern. "You sure about this, Emma?" Hank asked as they reinforced the round pen with stronger panels. "Mike tells me this Mustang's a real devil." "He's not a devil," Emma replied, her gaze distant as she recalled the stallion's eyes. "He's just never had anyone understand him before." Sarah watched her daughter's transformation with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The light had returned to Emma's eyes, but she worried about what would happen if this wild horse proved beyond even Emma's remarkable abilities. What would another failure do to her fragile recovery? The morning of Spirit's arrival dawned clear and bright. Emma was up before sunrise, dressed and in her wheelchair, directing final preparations with an energy Sarah hadn't seen since before the accident. The specialized trailer would arrive by noon, and everything needed to be perfect. "Remember," Emma reminded everyone, "when the trailer gets here, I want everyone to stand back. No crowding, no sudden movements. Let him come out in his own time and find his own space." Luis nodded, but couldn't help asking, "And then what? How you gonna train a horse you can't even get near?" Emma smiled, a patient expression that made her look older than her 16 years. "I'm not going to train him, not in the way you're thinking. First, we need to establish trust. Everything else comes after that." By mid-morning, word had spread through the small ranching community that the Reynolds farm was taking in the notorious wild stallion from the BLM facility. Cars and trucks began to appear along the road, neighbors and local ranchers gathering to witness the arrival, some out of concern, others out of curiosity, and a few, Emma suspected, simply waiting to see the disaster they believed would unfold. "Quite an audience," Sarah murmured as another truck pulled up. Emma shrugged, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Let them watch. It doesn't change anything." When Mike's truck appeared on the horizon, pulling the large horse trailer behind it, Emma's heart began to race. This was it, the moment that would determine whether her instincts were right or whether she had set herself up for heartbreak and humiliation. The truck pulled into the yard, dust settling around it as Mike stepped out, his expression grave. "He's been sedated for transport," he explained as he approached Emma. "Just enough to keep him calm during the drive. He'll be fully alert within 30 minutes of release." Emma nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "Let's give him space to wake up in the round pen. Once he's oriented, we can open the inner gate to the larger paddock." The gathered crowd fell silent as Mike backed the trailer up to the round pen's entrance. The tension in the air was palpable as he and Luis carefully secured the panels to create a chute from the trailer to the pen, ensuring there was no way for the stallion to escape during transfer. "Ready?" Mike asked, his hand on the trailer latch. Emma took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready?" The moment the trailer door swung open, everyone seemed to hold their breath. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a dark shape emerged from the shadows of the trailer, Spirit, moving cautiously, his partially sedated state making him less reactive, but no less majestic. His coat gleamed in the midday sun as he made his way down the chute and into the round pen, his movements surprisingly graceful despite the sedation. Once inside, he shook his head as if to clear it, then stood still, taking in his new surroundings with wary attention. "Beautiful," someone in the crowd murmured, and murmurs of agreement followed. Beautiful, yes, but dangerous too. Even in his subdued state, the power in his muscled body was evident, as was the intelligence in his eyes, as they swept over the humans gathered outside his enclosure. Those eyes found Emma, sitting in her wheelchair just beyond the fence and locked onto her. There was recognition there. He remembered her from the facility. For a moment, horse and girl regarded each other in silence, each assessing the other across the barrier of species and circumstance. "Give him time," Emma said quietly, though whether she was speaking to the onlookers or to the horse wasn't clear. Just give him time. The crowd dispersed gradually as the afternoon wore on, and the show proved less dramatic than anticipated. Spirit remained at the far end of the round pen, occasionally pacing but mostly watching, especially when Emma was present. As the sedation wore off completely, his movements became more energetic, more testing of the boundaries, but he made no aggressive moves toward the humans who kept a respectful distance. By evening, only the farm residents remained. Sarah brought Emma a light dinner on a tray, setting it beside her daughter, who had barely moved from her observation post near the round pen. "You should come inside, get some rest," Sarah suggested gently. "It's been a long day." Emma shook her head, her eyes never leaving the stallion. "I want to stay a little longer." He's still adjusting, trying to understand what this place is, what we want from him. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I'll bring you a blanket. The nights get cold." When Sarah returned with the blanket, she found Emma speaking softly to Spirit, who stood at the opposite end of the pen, ears pricked forward as if listening. "And I know you're scared," Emma was saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's strange here. Everything's changed. But you're safe now. No one's going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. No one's going to break you or hurt you, I promise." The stallion's tail swished, but he didn't move away or show signs of agitation. If anything, he seemed almost curious about this strange human who spoke to him, as if she understood his fears. Sarah draped the blanket around Emma's shoulders, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle the horse. "He seems to be listening to you," she observed quietly. Emma nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "He is. He doesn't trust me yet, not even close, but he's willing to listen. That's more than he gave anyone at the facility." "How long do you think it will take to gain his trust?" Emma considered the question, watching as Spirit finally turned away to investigate the water trough at the far side of the pen. "I don't know. Weeks, maybe months. However long it takes. You can't rush trust, especially with a horse that's known nothing but betrayal from humans." Sarah squeezed her daughter's shoulder, recognizing the determination in her voice. "Well, if anyone can reach him, it's you." As darkness fell completely, Emma finally allowed herself to be wheeled back to the house, though she insisted on returning at first light. That night, she slept better than she had in years, her dreams filled not with the twisted metal and screams of the accident, but with open plains and the sound of hoofbeats. In the paddock, under a canopy of stars, Spirit stood alert, his senses taking in every sound, every scent of this strange new place. But his eyes kept returning to the darkened house where the wheeled human had disappeared, his keen instincts telling him that something important had changed in his world, though he couldn't yet understand what it was or what it would mean for his future. Dawn had barely broken when Emma wheeled herself back to the round pen, a thermos of hot cocoa balanced on her lap. The morning air was crisp, carrying the earthy scents of dew-dampened grass and distant pine forests. Spirit stood at the far end of the enclosure, his dark silhouette sharply defined against the lightening sky. His head came up as Emma approached, nostrils flaring to catch her scent. "Good morning," Emma said softly, stopping her wheelchair at what she judged to be a comfortable distance for the stallion. "I brought breakfast." She opened a small bag hanging from her chair and pulled out an apple, which she placed on the ground inside the pen, using a long-handled grabber tool to push it through the fence rails. Then she backed away, creating space between herself and the offering. Spirit watched every movement with those intelligent eyes, his body tense and ready to flee at the slightest provocation. The apple lay untouched on the ground between them, a simple bridge neither was ready to cross. "It's okay," Emma told him, settling back with her cocoa. "No rush. We have all the time in the world." And so began their routine. Each morning, Emma arrived at dawn with a small offering, an apple, a carrot, a handful of oats. Each morning she placed it just inside the fence and then retreated to a respectful distance. And each morning, Spirit watched and waited until she had wheeled herself a significant distance away before approaching the food with cautious steps, nostrils testing the air for any hint of trickery. The first few days he would only investigate the offerings after Emma had left completely. But by the end of the first week, he would approach while she was still present, though he kept his distance, always watching her from the corner of his eye as he took the food. "He's making progress," Sarah observed one morning as she joined Emma at her vigil. Emma nodded, her eyes never leaving the stallion. "Small steps. The important thing is that he's starting to associate me with something positive." Sarah studied her daughter's profile, noting the concentration in her expression, the quiet patience that had replaced the angry frustration of the past 3 years. "You've changed since he arrived," she said carefully. A small smile touched Emma's lips. "I have something to focus on besides everything I can't do." By the second week, Emma had established a predictable presence in Spirit's life. She would arrive at dawn with food, then sit quietly nearby, sometimes reading aloud from a book, sometimes simply talking to him in a low, steady voice about inconsequential things, the weather, the other horses on the farm, memories from her childhood. "I used to compete, you know," she told him one morning as he cautiously ate an apple she had rolled toward him. "Dressage mainly, though I dabbled in jumping too. Everyone said I had a natural seat, whatever that means." She laughed softly without bitterness. "Guess that doesn't matter much now." Spirit's ears flicked toward her voice, though his eyes remained wary. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing," she continued, almost to herself. "Maybe I needed to learn a different way of connecting with horses, a way that isn't about control or performance." By the third week, Emma had moved her chair closer to the fence, bit by bit, day by day, until she was sitting just outside the rails. Spirit no longer retreated to the far end of the pen when she appeared, though he maintained a careful distance, watching her with that unblinking gaze that seemed to see through to her soul. "You should try opening the gate to the larger paddock," Luis suggested one afternoon as he delivered fresh hay. "Let him have more space." Emma considered this, watching Spirit pace the perimeter of the round pen. "Tomorrow," she decided, "but not when everyone's watching, just you and me early, before the day gets busy." The next morning, Luis met Emma at the round pen as promised. The sky was just beginning to lighten, the air still and expectant with the promise of dawn. "Ready?" Luis asked, his hand on the inner gate that connected to the 2-acre paddock beyond. Emma nodded, her heart beating faster with anticipation. "Ready." Luis swung the gate open, then stepped well back, leaving a clear path from the round pen to the open space beyond. Spirit, who had been watching their movements with keen attention, froze in place, his muscles tensed as if for flight. "It's okay," Emma called softly. "It's your choice. No one's going to force you." For long moments, the stallion remained motionless, his dark eyes shifting from the open gate to the humans and back again as if suspecting a trap. Then, with a sudden decision, he bolted through the opening, mane and tail flying as he galloped into the larger enclosure, testing its boundaries with powerful strides. Emma laughed aloud at the sheer beauty of his movement, the joy evident in every line of his body as he ran freely for the first time in weeks. "Look at him go," she breathed, a fierce pride swelling in her chest. "That's who he really is." Luis nodded, a new respect in his eyes as he watched the stallion. "I'm beginning to see what you see in him." The expanded territory brought new dynamics to their relationship. With more space, Spirit seemed less cornered, less defensive. He would still maintain his distance from Emma, but the quality of his attention had shifted. Now, when she spoke, He would sometimes stop what he was doing to listen, his ears pricked forward, his intelligent eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel truly seen. "I think he's starting to trust you," Sarah remarked one evening as they watched Spirit from the farmhouse porch. The stallion was grazing at the far end of the paddock, but his head came up occasionally to track Emma's wheelchair as she moved about the yard. "Not yet," Emma replied. "But he's considering it. He's trying to decide if I'm worth the risk." The breakthrough came unexpectedly, on a morning when heavy rain had kept Emma from her usual dawn visit. By the time the skies cleared, it was mid-afternoon, and she wheeled herself to the paddock with a sense of having disrupted their carefully established routine. Spirit was nowhere to be seen when she arrived, and for a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Had he somehow escaped? Had something happened to him? Then she spotted him, standing in the shelter they had built at the far end of the paddock, his dark coat almost invisible in the shadows. Emma called to him softly, but he didn't emerge. Concerned, she wheeled herself along the fence line until she was opposite the shelter. What she saw made her breath catch. Spirit was standing motionless, his right foreleg held slightly off the ground. Even from a distance, Emma could see the swelling around his fetlock and the pain in his posture. "Oh, Spirit," she murmured, her heart aching for him. "What happened?" The stallion's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Emma saw something new there. Not just wariness or defiance, but vulnerability. He was hurt, and he was afraid, and somewhere in his wild heart, he was looking to her for help. Without hesitation, Emma opened the paddock gate and wheeled herself inside. It was the first time she had entered his space since his arrival, and a distant part of her mind registered the danger. But the need in Spirit's eyes overrode caution. "I'm coming," she told him, her voice gentle but firm. "I won't hurt you. I promise." Slowly, giving him time to adjust to her approach, Emma wheeled herself toward the shelter. Spirit watched her come, his body tense but no longer poised for flight. When she was within 10 feet, he snorted softly, a questioning sound. "That's right," Emma encouraged him. "It's just me. You know me." 5 feet away, she stopped, extending her hand palm up in the universal gesture of peace. "Let me help you," she whispered. "Please." For what seemed like an eternity, they remained frozen in tableau. The wounded wild horse and the girl in the wheelchair, each broken in their own way, each reaching across a gulf of fear and pain toward something neither fully understood. Then, with infinite slowness, Spirit extended his muzzle toward Emma's outstretched hand. The touch was feather-light, Spirit's velvety muzzle against Emma's fingertips, but its significance thundered through her like a physical force. Time seemed to suspend as they connected, the wild stallion and the wheelchair-bound girl, each acknowledging the other's presence not just as predator and prey, or human and beast, but as two beings capable of choice and trust. Emma remained perfectly still, barely breathing, as Spirit's warm breath ghosted across her palm. Then, with a gentle exhale that seemed almost like a sigh, he pulled back, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he shifted his weight, again favoring his injured foreleg. "Your leg hurts," Emma said softly. "Will you let me look at it?" Moving with deliberate slowness, telegraphing each action before she made it, Emma wheeled herself closer. Spirit tensed but stood his ground, his eyes never leaving her face. When she was close enough to reach his leg, she stopped again, giving him time to adjust to her proximity. "I'm going to touch your leg now," she told him, her voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Just to see what's wrong. I'll be gentle." With infinite care, Emma reached out and placed her hand on Spirit's foreleg, just above the swollen fetlock. The stallion flinched but didn't pull away or strike out. His muscles trembled beneath her touch, but he was giving her a chance a precious, fragile trust that Emma knew could shatter in an instant if she made a wrong move. Her fingers explored the injury gently, finding heat and swelling but no obvious cuts or puncture wounds. "You've sprained it," she concluded. "Probably caught it between fence posts or in a hole while running." Knowing she needed supplies to treat the injury properly, Emma reluctantly withdrew her hand. "I need to get some things to help you," she explained, as if Spirit could understand every word. "I'll be right back, I promise." When she wheeled out of the shelter, Emma half expected Spirit to bolt, to retreat back into the defensive wariness that had characterized their interactions until now. But to her surprise, he remained where he was, watching her go with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold a new awareness of her. Emma returned 20 minutes later with a small first aid kit balanced on her lap. Luis followed at a respectful distance, carrying a bucket of cool water and cloths. "Are you sure about this?" he asked in a low voice. "He's injured and scared. That makes him more dangerous, not less." "He's trusting me," Emma replied, her voice firm with certainty. "I won't betray that." Luis shook his head but said nothing more, setting the bucket down where Emma could reach it before backing away to watch from outside the fence. Sarah joined him a few moments later, her face tight with concern as she saw her daughter in the enclosure with the wild stallion. Spirit had not moved from the shelter. If anything, his leg seemed more painful now, the swelling more pronounced. He greeted Emma's return with a soft, nickering sound that sent a flood of warmth through her chest. "I'm back," she told him, wheeling herself into the shelter again, "and I'm going to help that leg feel better." What followed was a slow, patient process of wound care that demanded complete concentration from Emma and extraordinary trust from Spirit. She soaked cloths in the cool water and applied them gently to the swelling, talking to him all the while in a low, soothing voice. When it came time to apply the anti-inflammatory ointment, she showed him the tube first, letting him sniff it, ensuring nothing came as a surprise. Throughout it all, Spirit remained remarkably still, only occasionally shifting his weight when the pain flared. His eyes rarely left Emma's face, as if he were memorizing her features, assessing her intentions through each careful touch. "You're the bravest horse I've ever known," Emma told him as she finished wrapping the leg with a light support bandage. "And the smartest. You know I'm trying to help, don't you?" In response, Spirit lowered his head and nudged Emma's shoulder gently, an unmistakable gesture of acknowledgement that brought tears to her eyes. From the fence line, Sarah watched in wonder as her daughter worked with the stallion everyone had deemed untamable. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," she whispered to Luis. "Reminds me of something my grandfather used to say," Luis replied, his voice soft with respect. "That the wounded recognize each other. That sometimes it takes someone who knows pain to understand pain in another." The bond forged that afternoon changed everything. Spirit's injury, while unfortunate, had created a bridge between them that might otherwise have taken months to build. In his moment of vulnerability, he had chosen to trust Emma, and that choice transformed their relationship. Over the next few days, as Emma returned regularly to check on his leg and change the bandage, Spirit began to anticipate her arrival. He would stand at the fence, watching for her wheelchair, and greet her with a soft nicker when she appeared. Each day, he allowed her a little closer, stayed a little longer, accepted her touch a little more readily. By the end of the week, Emma could run her hands over his neck and shoulders, smoothing the tangled mane that had never known a brush. At first, she could only reach these areas from her wheelchair, but soon she found herself wishing she could stand beside him, reach his back, feel the full length of him beneath her hands. "I have an idea," she told Sarah one evening, "but I'll need your help, and maybe Luis's too." The next morning, when Emma approached the paddock, She was not alone, and she was not in her wheelchair. Instead, she sat on a specialized mobility scooter that Luis had borrowed from a friend in town. The contraption was designed for off-road use with sturdy wheels and a stable platform that allowed Emma to sit higher, almost at standing height. Spirit eyed the unfamiliar device with suspicion at first, backing away when Emma drove it into the paddock. But her voice, that steady, gentle voice that had become his anchor in this strange human world, reassured him. "It's okay," she called softly. "It's just me, with a different chair. I wanted to be able to reach you better, that's all." Gradually, Spirit's curiosity overcame his caution. He approached the scooter, sniffing it thoroughly, his ears flicking back and forth as he processed this new development. Emma remained patient, allowing him all the time he needed to investigate. Finally, apparently satisfied that the scooter posed no threat, Spirit moved to Emma's side and lowered his head to her shoulder in what had become his characteristic greeting. Emma's heart swelled with affection as she reached up to stroke his neck, marveling at how far they had come from those first tense days of distant observation. "Good boy," she murmured. "That's my brave boy." With the greater mobility and height afforded by the scooter, Emma could now reach Spirit's back, and she began the slow process of accustoming him to being groomed. At first, she used just her hands, stroking and patting, establishing the sensation of touch along his spine and flanks. Then, gradually, she introduced a soft brush, always showing it to him first, always moving slowly and predictably. To everyone's amazement, Spirit not only tolerated the grooming but seemed to enjoy it. His eyes would half close in pleasure as the brush smoothed his coat, and he would shift his position to indicate where he wanted attention next, as if directing Emma's ministrations. "I never would have believed it," Mike said when he visited to check on Spirit's progress. "That's the same horse that nearly killed 3 trainers at the BLM facility." Emma smiled, running her hand along Spirit's gleaming neck. He just needed someone to understand him, to give him a choice. The stallion's injured leg healed cleanly, thanks to Emma's diligent care, but the trust between them continued to deepen long after the bandages came off. Spirit now came when Emma called, followed her scooter around the paddock, and stood patiently beside her for increasingly long periods of grooming and interaction. But still, Emma wanted more. As their bond strengthened, a longing grew within her, a desire not just to stand beside Spirit, but to feel what it would be like to be on his back, to move as one with him as she had with horses before the accident. It was a desire she barely dared acknowledge, even to herself. "Do you think," she asked Spirit one evening as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, "that you and I could learn to fly together?" The idea of riding Spirit took root in Emma's mind, growing stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just about reclaiming a part of her former life. It was about discovering a new kind of freedom, a way of moving through the world that transcended the limitations of her wheelchair. But the practical challenges were enormous and the risks even greater. "You want to do what?" Sarah's voice rose with alarm when Emma finally shared her thoughts. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the remains of dinner between them, evening shadows stretching across the worn wooden floor. "I want to ride him," Emma repeated, her voice quiet but determined. "Not right away, of course. We'd need to work up to it. But eventually I think it's possible." Sarah shook her head, fear evident in her eyes. "Emma, honey, think about what you're saying. Even before your accident, you wouldn't have attempted to ride a barely tamed wild Mustang. And now, with your physical limitations..." She trailed off, the unspoken concerns hanging heavy in the air between them. "I know it sounds crazy," Emma acknowledged, "but there's something special between Spirit and me, a connection I can't explain. He trusts me, Mom, and I trust him. Trust isn't enough when you're dealing with 1,000 pounds of unpredictable horse," Sarah countered. "What if he spooks? What if you fall? After everything we've been through, I can't bear the thought of you getting hurt again." Emma reached across the table to take her mother's hand. "I understand your fear. I really do. But Mom, for the first time since the accident, I feel alive again. Like there's a future worth fighting for. I need this. I need to at least try." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, torn between the joy of seeing her daughter's renewed spirit and the terror of what this ambitious goal might cost them. "I don't know, Emma. It seems so dangerous." "We'll take it slow," Emma promised. "One step at a time. We'll get professional help, use all the safety equipment available. If at any point it seems too risky, we'll stop." In the end, Sarah reluctantly agreed, but with conditions. They would consult with Emma's physical therapist, develop a comprehensive safety plan, and proceed only if both medical professionals and experienced horse trainers felt it was feasible. The next few weeks became a whirlwind of research and preparation. Emma threw herself into strengthening exercises designed to improve her core stability and upper body strength. Her physical therapist, Dr. Reyes, initially skeptical, became increasingly supportive as she witnessed Emma's determination and progress. "Your upper body is becoming remarkably strong," Dr. Reyes noted during one session, "and your core stability has improved significantly. If, and it's still a big if, you do attempt riding, these gains will be crucial for maintaining your balance." Meanwhile, Sarah contacted a specialized therapeutic riding instructor named Meredith who worked with disabled riders. Meredith visited the farm to assess Spirit and observe his interaction with Emma. "Normally, I'd never recommend someone in Emma's condition attempting to ride a formerly wild horse," Meredith told Sarah afterward. "But I have to admit, I've never seen anything quite like their connection. It's extraordinary." Together, they developed a careful, step-by-step plan. The first phase involved getting Spirit accustomed to wearing a saddle pad, then a specialized adaptive saddle designed to provide maximum support and security for Emma. Meredith recommended a safety harness system that would connect Emma to the saddle, preventing falls while still allowing movement. Spirit, to everyone's surprise, accepted these new elements with remarkable patience. He would stand perfectly still as Emma placed the pad on his back from her scooter, turning his head to watch with curious eyes, but showing no signs of fear or resistance. When the lightweight adaptive saddle was introduced, he sniffed it thoroughly before allowing Emma to place it on his back. "He understands," Emma insisted when Luis expressed amazement at the stallion's cooperation. "He knows this is important to me." The most challenging aspect was teaching Spirit to kneel on command, a specialized behavior that would allow Emma to transfer more easily from her scooter to his back. This required patience and creativity, as traditional training methods weren't always applicable to their unique situation. Emma worked with Meredith to break the kneeling behavior into tiny, achievable steps, rewarding Spirit generously for each small success. To everyone's amazement, the stallion seemed to grasp what they were asking, sometimes anticipating the next step in the training sequence before Emma even cued him. "It's like he's problem-solving," Meredith remarked, watching Spirit adjust his position to make it easier for Emma to reach his back. "I've never seen a horse, especially one with his history, so attuned to a human's needs." By late autumn, nearly 4 months after Spirit's arrival at the farm, they were ready to attempt a momentous step, Emma's first time on his back. The day dawned clear and cool, the morning mist rising from the fields as the small group gathered in the paddock. Sarah, Luis, Meredith, and Dr. Reyes all stood by, each assigned specific roles in the safety plan they had meticulously developed. Emma felt a strange calm as she guided her scooter to where Spirit waited. The nervousness she had anticipated was absent, replaced by a certainty that felt bone-deep and unshakable. When she reached the stallion, he lowered his head to her shoulder in their customary greeting, his breath warm against her neck. "Today's the day," she whispered to him. "Are you ready?" Spirit's ears flicked forward at the sound of her voice, his dark eyes steady and unafraid. Following their practiced routine, Emma gave the hand signal for Spirit to kneel. The stallion gracefully lowered himself to the ground, folding his front legs beneath him and then his hind legs, until he was resting on his belly in the soft earth. In this position, his back was low enough for Emma to transfer onto with minimal assistance. "Good boy," she praised, her voice thick with emotion. "Perfect." With Luis and Meredith standing ready to assist if needed, Emma carefully positioned her scooter parallel to Spirit's side. The adaptive saddle weighted on his back, with its specialized handles and supports designed for her unique needs. "Remember," Meredith said quietly, "just a short session today. 5 minutes at most, even if everything goes perfectly." Emma nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Then, with practiced movements, she used her arms to lift and transfer her body from the scooter to Spirit's back, settling carefully into the adaptive saddle. Luis helped secure the safety harness while Emma focused on maintaining her balance and keeping her legs in the correct position. Throughout the transfer, Spirit remained utterly still, as if understanding the importance of his role in this delicate process. Only the occasional flick of his ear or soft exhale indicated he was a living being rather than a statue. When Emma was securely in place, she gave Spirit the signal to rise. With remarkable gentleness, he lifted himself from the ground, first straightening his front legs, then his hind legs, until he was standing with Emma on his back. The sensation was overwhelming. After 3 years confined to her wheelchair, Emma was suddenly elevated. Her perspective shifted dramatically. The world looked different from up here, wider, more expansive, full of possibility. She could feel Spirit's warmth beneath her, the subtle movements of his breathing, the powerful life force contained within his muscled body. "We did it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Spirit, we really did it." From the ground, Sarah watched with her hand pressed to her mouth, her own tears falling freely. The sight of her daughter sitting tall and proud on the stallion's back was a vision she had never dared hope for after the accident. For those few precious minutes, as Spirit stood perfectly still beneath her, Emma felt something she had thought lost forever, a sense of wholeness, of completeness. On Spirit's back, she wasn't defined by what she couldn't do. Up here, with the wind in her hair and the strength of the stallion beneath her, she was simply Emma, unbroken, unbounded, free. Those first moments on Spirit's back ignited a transformation in Emma that was visible to everyone around her. A light returned to her eyes, not just the determined focus that had appeared when Spirit first arrived, but a genuine joy that Sarah hadn't seen since before the accident. Each day brought new progress, small victories that accumulated like treasures. The brief sitting sessions gradually extended into slow, careful walks, with Luis or Meredith leading Spirit by a loose lead rope, while Emma focused on maintaining her balance and position. The adaptive saddle provided crucial support for her legs, which lacked the muscle control to grip the horse's sides, while specialized handles gave her upper body the stability she needed. "Remember to breathe," Meredith would remind her as they completed slow circuits of the paddock. "Let your body move with his. Don't fight the motion." Emma found that her years of riding experience before the accident hadn't disappeared. They had simply been dormant, waiting for this moment to re-emerge. Her body remembered things her conscious mind had forgotten: the subtle shifts needed to maintain balance, the rhythm of a horse's walk, the silent communication that passes between rider and mount through the smallest adjustments of weight and pressure. Spirit, for his part, seemed to understand the precious responsibility he carried. The wild, defiant stallion who had once charged at anyone who approached was now the model of careful attentiveness, placing each hoof with deliberate precision when Emma was on his back, responding to the lightest touch of her hand on his neck, the softest word near his ear. "It's remarkable," Dr. Reyes commented during one of her visits to monitor Emma's progress. "The therapeutic benefits alone are significant. Improved core strength, better circulation in your legs, enhanced balance and proprioception. But beyond the physical, I'm seeing psychological benefits that no traditional therapy could provide." Emma nodded, understanding exactly what the doctor meant. Being on Spirit's back gave her something that no wheelchair, however advanced, could offer: a sense of partnership, of mutual dependence. Spirit needed her guidance, her reassurance in this human world so foreign to his nature, and she needed his strength, his willingness to lend her his powerful body and carry her beyond the limitations of her own. By the time winter settled over the farm, bringing short days and frosty mornings, Emma and Spirit had established a routine that included daily riding sessions, weather permitting. They had progressed from walking with a leader to Emma guiding Spirit independently within the confines of the paddock, using voice commands and light pressure from the specialized reins adapted for her needs. "I think we're ready for more," Emma told her mother one evening as they sat by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows across the living room floor. "I want to take him out on the trails." Sarah looked up from her book, concern immediately etching her features. "The trails? Emma, that's a big step from controlled riding in the paddock." "I know it is," Emma acknowledged, "but we've mastered everything Meredith has taught us. Spirit is solid, steadier than any horse I've ever ridden. And I need this, Mom. I need to feel what it's like to move freely through the world again." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying her daughter's face. The changes in Emma over the past months were undeniable. Not just physical strength, but a renewed confidence, a sense of purpose that had been missing since the accident. Could she deny her this next step toward reclaiming her life? "We'll talk to Meredith," Sarah finally said. "If she thinks you're both ready, we'll make a plan. A careful plan," she emphasized. Meredith did indeed believe they were ready for this next challenge, though she recommended additional safety precautions. Luis would accompany them on horseback, carrying emergency supplies and a satellite phone. Emma would wear a helmet equipped with a communication device, allowing her to maintain contact with Luis even if they became separated. The morning of their first trail ride dawned clear and cold, the December air crisp with the promise of snow later in the week. Emma woke before sunrise, her excitement making sleep impossible. By the time the first pale light touched the eastern horizon, she was already in the stable, grooming Spirit with careful, loving strokes. "Today's a big day for both of us," she told him as she worked. "Our first real adventure together." Spirit seemed to sense her excitement, standing alertly as she prepared him for the ride, his ears pricked forward with anticipation. When Emma brought out the specially designed saddle, he lowered himself to his knees without being asked, a behavior that had become so natural it seemed like an extension of their shared thoughts. By mid-morning, everything was ready. Luis waited on his steady bay gelding, saddlebags packed with water, first aid supplies, and emergency rations. Sarah stood by the paddock gate, her expression a mixture of pride and barely concealed worry. "Remember your promise," she said as she helped Emma secure the communication helmet. "At the first sign of any problem, you turn around and come straight back." "I promise," Emma assured her, understanding her mother's fear. "We'll be careful." The moment they left the confines of the paddock and set out across the open fields toward the wooded trails beyond, Emma felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This freedom, this partnership with the magnificent creature beneath her, was what she had been missing for 3 long years. Spirit moved with confident strides, his hooves making soft thuds against the earth, his ears flicking occasionally to catch Emma's voice as she spoke to him. Luis rode a respectful distance behind, giving them space while remaining close enough to assist if needed. As they entered the forest trail, dappled sunlight filtering through bare branches overhead, Emma felt as if she had crossed some invisible threshold. The world opened up before her. Trails she had thought she would never see again. Vistas she had resigned herself to experiencing only through photographs or distant glimpses from accessible viewpoints. "Look at that spirit," she murmured as they paused at the crest of a small rise overlooking the valley below. "Isn't it beautiful?" The stallion stood quietly, his sides rising and falling with steady breaths, his presence solid and reassuring beneath her. In that moment, Emma felt a oneness with him that transcended words, a sense that they had both found in each other exactly what they needed to be whole again. The winter passed in a series of increasingly confident explorations. Emma and Spirit ventured further on the trails with each outing, their bond deepening with every mile covered, every challenge faced together. When snow blanketed the landscape, they adjusted their routine but didn't abandon it, with Luis always accompanying them as a safety measure. News of the remarkable partnership between the disabled girl and the once untamable wild stallion spread beyond their small community. A local newspaper ran a feature story, complete with photographs of Emma and Spirit on the trails. The article caught the attention of a regional TV station, which sent a reporter to interview Emma about her journey. "What is it about Spirit that makes this possible?" the reporter asked as cameras captured footage of Emma guiding the stallion through a series of gentle turns in the paddock. Emma considered the question carefully. "Most people looked at both of us and saw only limitations," she finally answered. "They saw a wild horse too dangerous to handle and a girl too broken to ride. But when Spirit and I look at each other, we don't see what's missing or what's damaged. We see possibility. We see strength. We see a future that we can build together, one step at a time." The story aired in February and quickly went viral online, touching hearts across the country. Suddenly, Emma found herself fielding requests for interviews, for appearances at therapeutic riding centers, for advice from other disabled riders seeking to reclaim their passion. "It's overwhelming," she confessed to Spirit one evening as they stood together in the quiet of the stable, the stallion's soft breaths forming small clouds in the cold air. "Everyone wants a piece of our story." Spirit nudged her shoulder gently, his dark eyes seeming to hold a wisdom beyond words. "You're right," Emma smiled, stroking his neck. "Our story isn't finished yet. We're just getting started." Spring arrived at the Reynolds farm in a burst of green, the landscape transforming as if overnight. Wildflowers dotted the meadows, birds returned to build nests in the eaves of the barn, and a renewed energy seemed to pulse through everything living. For Emma, this season of rebirth held special significance. It marked nearly a year since Spirit had entered her life and changed everything. The media attention following their television appearance had eventually died down, allowing them to return to the quiet rhythm of their daily life together. But something had shifted in Emma's perspective. The realization that their story had touched so many lives planted a seed in her mind, one that grew alongside the spring flowers until she could no longer ignore it. "I've been thinking," she told her mother one morning as they sat on the porch watching Spirit graze in the paddock, "about the future, about what I want to do with my life." Sarah glanced at her daughter, noting the thoughtful expression on her face. "And what have you decided?" "I want to help others like me," Emma said, her voice gaining confidence as she articulated the idea that had been forming for months. People who've lost something they thought they could never get back. People who need to find a new way forward. The idea crystallized into a plan to transform part of their farm into a specialized therapeutic riding center focused specifically on connecting disabled riders with horses that traditional programs might consider too challenging or unsuitable. Not every horse will be a formerly wild Mustang, Emma explained to Mike when he visited and she shared her vision. But there are so many horses in rescue situations, horses that have been labeled problem cases or unrideable, just waiting for someone to see their potential. Mike nodded, impressed by her insight. It's like you and Spirit proved that the traditional rules don't always apply. Sometimes the most unlikely partnerships turn out to be the most powerful. Sarah, though initially concerned about the practical challenges, found herself increasingly supportive as Emma mapped out her plan with surprising thoroughness. They would start small, just 2 or 3 clients at first, carefully matched with horses that Emma would help select and train. They would need to convert one of the outbuildings into an accessible facility with ramps and specialized equipment. They would need insurance, certifications, trained volunteers. It's a lot, Sarah acknowledged one evening as they reviewed Emma's detailed proposal. But I've never seen you this passionate about anything since before the accident, and I think it could work, I really do. With spring turning to summer, preparations began in earnest. Luis and 2 other ranch hands started renovations on the old equipment barn, transforming it into an accessible riding facility with a covered arena for year-round use. Sarah took courses in nonprofit management and began the paperwork to establish their program as a registered charity. Emma, meanwhile, focused on the most important element, the horses. With Mike's help, she began visiting rescue facilities throughout the state, looking for animals with the right temperament and potential for therapeutic work. I'll know them when I see them, she told Mike as they drove to yet another rescue center, the way I knew Spirit was special. Spirit himself seemed to understand his role in this evolving mission. When Emma brought home the first rescue, a chestnut mare named Ruby with a history of abuse that had left her fearful and defensive, the stallion's behavior was remarkable. He positioned himself in the adjacent paddock, watching calmly as Emma worked with Ruby, his presence somehow reassuring to the traumatized mare. It's like he's mentoring her, Meredith observed one day as they watched Emma guide Ruby through basic groundwork exercises, Spirit standing attentively at the fence line, showing her that humans can be trusted. By late summer, 2 more horses had joined their program, a retired roping horse named Duke with arthritis that made him unsuitable for his previous work, but perfect for gentle therapeutic riding, and a striking Appaloosa called Domino who had been deemed untrainable after an accident left him partially blind in one eye. Each horse responded to Emma's patient, understanding approach. It wasn't just her skill with horses that made the difference. It was her fundamental ability to see beyond their perceived limitations to the potential within. The same gift that had allowed her to connect with Spirit now extended to these new charges, creating a small herd of horses that many had given up on but who were now finding new purpose. Word spread through the disabled community about the unique program taking shape at Reynolds Farm. The first official client arrived in September, a 12-year-old boy named Jaden who had lost his left arm in an accident the previous year. Withdrawn and angry, much as Emma had been after her own trauma, Jaden arrived with reluctance written in every line of his body. "I don't want to be here," he told Emma bluntly when Sarah brought him into the barn. "My mom's making me come." Emma nodded, understanding completely. "That's fair. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do today. Why don't you just meet the horses and see what happens?" She wheeled herself down the center aisle of the barn, Jaden trailing behind her with affected disinterest. When they reached Spirit's stall, the stallion came forward immediately, extending his muzzle toward Emma in greeting before turning his attention to the boy. "This is Spirit," Emma said. "He was wild when we first met. Everyone said he could never be tamed, let alone become a therapy horse." Jaden studied the stallion, a flicker of interest breaking through his carefully maintained indifference. "What's wrong with him?" "Nothing now," Emma replied. "But he was considered too dangerous. too damaged by his experiences to ever trust humans. They were going to put him down because no one believed in him. Something in those words resonated with Jaden. He stepped closer to the stall, his remaining hand reaching out hesitantly. Spirit, with the gentle awareness that still amazed everyone who witnessed it, lowered his head to meet the boy's touch. "He's so soft," Jaden whispered, genuine wonder replacing the anger in his voice for the first time. Emma smiled, recognizing the moment for what it was, the first tentative step on a healing journey she knew all too well. "Would you like to groom him?" That first session with Jaden established a pattern that would repeat itself many times in the months that followed. Children and adults came to the farm bearing visible and invisible wounds, missing limbs, paralysis, traumatic brain injuries, PTSD. Some, like Jaden, arrived resistant and closed off. Others came with desperate hope or fearful uncertainty. Regardless of how they began, something magical happened when Emma introduced them to the horses, especially to Spirit. The stallion seemed to have an uncanny ability to respond to each person exactly as they needed, offering steadfast patience with the hesitant, gentle playfulness with the withdrawn, and rock-solid reliability with the fearful. "He understands suffering," Emma explained to a reporter who visited to do a follow-up story on their program. "And he understands healing, not intellectually the way we do, but in his heart, in his spirit." By the time autumn painted the surrounding mountains in fiery hues of red and gold, Reynolds Therapeutic Riding Center had 6 regular clients and a waiting list that grew longer each week. Emma, who had once believed her life effectively ended with her paralysis, now found herself at the center of a growing community, her days filled with purpose and meaning beyond anything she could have imagined in those dark days after the accident. The success of Reynolds Therapeutic Riding Center brought both rewards and challenges. As winter approached again, Emma found herself balancing the growing demands of the program with her own relationship with Spirit, which remained the foundation of everything they had built. The stallion's schedule was carefully managed. Emma ensured he had ample rest between therapy sessions and regular opportunities for the two of them to ride alone on the trails, maintaining the special bond that had started it all. "You're the heart of this place," Emma told Spirit on a crisp November morning as they stood together watching the sunrise, her breath forming small clouds in the frosty air. "I never want you to feel like just another therapy horse." Spirit nudged her shoulder gently as if understanding her concerns. In the 1.5 years since his arrival, he had filled out and developed a glossy coat that reflected his excellent care. But the wild spirit that had drawn Emma to him remained intact. He was no longer the untamable Mustang that had terrified the BLM handlers, but neither had he become a docile, domesticated mount. He had found his own middle path, choosing cooperation rather than submission, partnership rather than servitude. The first significant challenge to their growing program came in early December, when a county inspector arrived to evaluate their facility for compliance with local regulations. The middle-aged man, clipboard in hand and skepticism written across his face, introduced himself as Frank Garrett. "We've received some concerns about your operation here," he explained stiffly as he surveyed the converted barn. "Questions about whether this facility meets safety requirements for a commercial enterprise, especially one serving disabled individuals." Emma, sitting tall in her wheelchair, met his gaze directly. "We're fully licensed and insured, Mr. Garrett. All our volunteers are trained in disability assistance, and we have regular safety inspections from the Certified Horsemanship Association." Garrett made non-committal noises as he began his inspection, measuring doorways, examining ramps, and scrutinizing the specialized equipment with an increasingly critical eye. Sarah accompanied him, providing documentation and answering questions, while Emma continued working with a teenage client named Maria, who was recovering from a spinal cord injury similar to Emma's own. "Don't worry about him," Emma assured Maria, who had grown tense watching the inspector's progress. "Focus on Domino. Feel how he's responding to your cues." But as the inspection continued, it became clear that Garrett was finding, or perhaps looking for, problems. His voice carried across the arena as he pointed out issues to Sarah. "This ramp doesn't meet ADA slope requirements. These electrical outlets aren't properly shielded. The emergency exit signage is insufficient." By the time he approached the riding area, his clipboard filled with notations, Garrett's expression had hardened into one of bureaucratic disapproval. He watched Maria and Emma work with Domino for several minutes before speaking. "I need to see documentation of specialized training for all horses used in your program," he stated, "particularly for the Mustang I've heard about. Using a formerly wild horse with disabled riders presents significant liability concerns." Emma's heart sank. They had certification for their program as a whole, but individual documentation for each horse's training, especially Spirit, whose education had been so unconventional, was something they hadn't anticipated needing. "Spirit is the gentlest, most reliable horse in our program," Emma began, but Garrett cut her off. "I need to see official documentation, Ms. Reynolds. Anecdotal assurances aren't sufficient for county approval." The inspection ended with Garrett presenting them with a detailed list of violations that needed to be addressed within 30 days, or their permit to operate would be suspended. After he left, Sarah and Emma sat in stunned silence in the office they had created in a corner of the barn. "This could shut us down," Sarah finally said, scanning the extensive list of required changes. "The cost of these modifications alone—" "There's something else going on here," Emma insisted, frustration evident in her voice. "These aren't standard inspections. Someone has specifically complained about us." Their suspicions were confirmed the next day when Mike called with information he'd gathered from a friend at the county office. "It's Gerald Whitman," he told them grimly. "He's been filing complaints about your operation for weeks." Gerald Whitman was the owner of Silver Pines Equestrian Center, a prestigious facility on the other side of the county that offered traditional riding lessons and boarding services. Emma had encountered him briefly at a regional equine expo the previous spring, where his dismissive attitude toward therapeutic riding had been barely concealed beneath a veneer of professional courtesy. But why would he target us? Sarah wondered. We're not competition for his business. We serve a completely different clientele. Land, Mike explained. He's been buying up properties all around yours for some development project. Your farm is the missing piece in the center of what he wants. The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. Their small farm, the sanctuary they had created, the program that was transforming lives, all of it threatened not by legitimate safety concerns, but by a wealthy businessman's expansion plans. "He can't do this," Emma said, her voice tight with anger. "We won't let him." The next few weeks became a desperate race against time. Sarah reached out to their small community for support, and the response was overwhelming. Local contractors volunteered labor to address the structural issues Garrett had identified. A disability rights attorney offered pro bono services to help them navigate the regulatory requirements. Parents of their clients organized fundraisers to cover the costs of the necessary modifications. Emma, meanwhile, focused on the issue of Spirit's documentation. She contacted Meredith, and together they developed a comprehensive training log that detailed the stallion's progress and specialized skills. They recorded video demonstrations of his reliability in various therapeutic scenarios, compiled testimonials from clients and professional colleagues, and created a formal portfolio of his unique qualifications. But even as they worked to address the inspector's demands, rumors spread that Whitman was applying pressure behind the scenes, using his considerable influence with county officials to ensure that whatever changes they made would never be quite enough. "We need to go public with this," Luis suggested one evening as they all sat around the kitchen table, exhaustion etched on their faces after another long day of renovations. Tell people what's really happening. Emma nodded slowly, an idea taking shape in her mind. Not just tell them, show them. The plan came together quickly. They would host an open house, inviting not just county officials and the local media, but the entire community. They would demonstrate the vital work being done at the center, the unique approach that made their program special, and the remarkable horses that had been given a second chance to serve a greater purpose. And spirit will be the centerpiece, Emma decided. If Whitman wants to claim he's unsafe, we'll let everyone see for themselves exactly what he's capable of. The date was set for the Saturday before Christmas, just 3 days before the county's deadline for compliance. As they sent out invitations and prepared for the event, a nervous energy filled the farm. This was more than a demonstration to satisfy regulatory requirements. It was a stand for everything they believed in, everything they had built together. The night before the open house, Emma stayed late in the barn, spending quiet time with each of the horses who had become such an integral part of their mission. She saved Spirit for last, sitting beside his stall as the winter darkness settled around them. "Tomorrow's a big day," she told him, reaching through the bars to stroke his velvety muzzle. "Everything depends on you, on us, on showing them what's really possible when people look beyond limitations to see potential." Spirit's soft exhale warmed her hand, his dark eyes reflecting the dim barn lights as he gazed at her, with what Emma had come to recognize as absolute trust. The same trust she placed in him every time she left her wheelchair behind and took to the trails on his back. "We've faced worse odds," she reminded him with a small smile. "They said you could never be tamed, and they said I would never ride again. We proved them all wrong. Tomorrow, we'll do it again." The morning of the open house dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp winter day that painted the landscape in shades of silver and blue. Emma woke before sunrise, her mind already racing with last-minute details and contingency plans. By the time the first hint of gold touched the eastern horizon, she was in the barn, moving from stall to stall, checking on each horse, saving Spirit for last. "Today's the day," she told him softly as she entered his stall, running her hands over his gleaming coat. "Today we show them who we really are." The stallion lowered his head to her shoulder in their familiar greeting, his breath warm against her neck. In the year and a half since he had arrived at the farm, their connection had deepened into something that transcended ordinary understanding, a bond built on mutual trust, respect, and an almost supernatural awareness of each other's needs. As the morning progressed, the farm transformed. Volunteers arrived to help with final preparations, stringing lights around the covered arena, setting up information displays about their program, and preparing refreshments for visitors. By noon, everything was ready, and Emma took a moment to survey what they had created together, not just the physical space, but the community that had formed around it. "No matter what happens today," Sarah said, coming to stand beside her daughter's wheelchair, "I'm so proud of what you've built here." Emma reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We built it together, all of us." The first guests began to arrive shortly after 1 o'clock. Families of their clients came first, followed by neighbors, local business owners, and curious community members who had heard about the unique program. A reporter and photographer from the county newspaper showed up, along with a crew from the regional television station that had featured them earlier in the year. Frank Garrett, the county inspector, arrived precisely at 2, clipboard in hand, and a stern expression on his face. He was accompanied by 2 other county officials, their presence underscoring the seriousness of the situation. Emma noted with a mixture of anger and determination that Gerald Whitman had also made an appearance, standing at the back of the gathering crowd with an air of smug expectation. "Welcome, everyone," Sarah began, addressing the assembled visitors from the center of the arena. "We're so grateful you've come to see the work we're doing here at Reynolds Therapeutic Riding Center. Today, we want to show you not just what we do, but why it matters." The program began with a demonstration by Jaden, the boy who had been their first official client. Now 13, he had progressed from reluctant participant to confident rider, and he guided Duke through a series of simple but precisely executed maneuvers, using only his voice and his single arm. The crowd applauded warmly when he finished, many visibly moved by his accomplishment. One by one, their clients demonstrated the skills they had developed and the unique ways each horse had been trained to accommodate specific disabilities. Maria, now able to sit a horse independently despite her limited leg function, showed how Domino responded to the lightest touch of the reins against his neck, compensating for her inability to use traditional leg cues. Throughout it all, Emma narrated, explaining their methodology, the careful matching of horse to rider, and the individualized training approach that recognized both the animal's history and the rider's specific needs. She noted Garrett making notes on his clipboard, his expression giving nothing away, while Whitman stood with arms crossed, occasionally whispering to a companion. Finally, it was time for the culmination of the program, Emma and Spirit's demonstration. As Louise helped her mount using their now familiar routine, a hush fell over the audience. Many had heard about the girl in the wheelchair who rode a formerly wild Mustang, but seeing it in person was another matter entirely. Once secure in the specialized saddle, Emma took a moment to center herself, feeling Spirit's solid presence beneath her, the subtle shift of his muscles as he awaited her cues. This was what they had worked toward for 18 months, not just physical skills, but a partnership built on absolute trust. "Spirit and I are going to show you what's possible when we look beyond limitations," Emma announced, her clear voice carrying across the now silent arena. "When I first met this horse, he was considered dangerous and untrainable. When he first met me, I was a girl who believed she would never ride again. Together we discovered that what others saw as our greatest weaknesses could become our greatest strengths." What followed left even those who had witnessed their progress speechless. Without using the reins, relying solely on subtle weight shifts and quiet voice commands, Emma guided Spirit through a series of movements that showcased both his intelligence and their extraordinary connection. They moved as one being, the boundaries between horse and rider seemingly dissolved in a dance of perfect communication. For the finale, they demonstrated how Spirit had been trained to respond to emergency situations, kneeling on command so Emma could safely dismount if needed, remaining steady if she lost balance, and coming immediately to her wheelchair if called. As Spirit gracefully knelt to allow Emma to transfer back to her chair, the audience erupted in applause. Even Frank Garrett had set aside his clipboard, watching with undisguised amazement. Only Whitman remained unmoved, his expression hardening as he recognized the impact the demonstration was having. When the formal program concluded, visitors were invited to tour the facility, ask questions, and meet the horses up close. Emma positioned herself near Spirit, answering queries and explaining their journey together, aware that Garrett and his colleagues were carefully examining every aspect of their operation. Finally, as the winter sun began to sink toward the horizon, Garrett approached Emma, his official demeanor softened by what he had witnessed. "Ms. Reynolds," he began, clearing his throat, "I've reviewed your documentation and observed your program in action. While there are still minor modifications needed to fully comply with county regulations, I see no reason why your permit should not be renewed pending completion of those adjustments." Relief washed over Emma, but before she could respond, Whitman pushed his way forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is absurd," he snapped. "That wild horse is a liability waiting to happen. One incident, one injury to a disabled client, and the county will be facing lawsuits for years." "Mr. Whitman," Garrett replied coolly, "as I'm sure you're aware, my job is to assess compliance with safety regulations, not to serve personal interests. Based on today's demonstrations and the extensive documentation provided, this program meets or exceeds our requirements. Whitman's face darkened further. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the threat sounded hollow in the face of the community's obvious support for the center. As Whitman stalked away, Jaden approached Emma, his young face solemn. "Is he going to shut us down?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Emma smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "No, Jaden. We're here to stay." The crowd dispersed gradually as darkness fell, leaving Emma, Sarah, and Luis to tend to the horses and close up the barn. Spirit, his role in the day's events complete, stood quietly in his stall, watching Emma with those intelligent eyes that had captured her heart from the beginning. "We did it, boy," she told him, reaching up to stroke his face. "We showed them what we can do together." Later that evening, sitting on the porch despite the winter chill, Emma and Sarah watched the stars emerge one by one in the clear night sky. The tensions of the past month had finally released, leaving a profound sense of accomplishment in their wake. "When I look back on the accident now," Emma said quietly, "I almost can't believe how angry I was, how lost I felt. I thought everything that mattered had been taken from me." Sarah nodded, understanding the journey her daughter had traveled. "And now?" Emma smiled, her gaze turning toward the barn where Spirit and the other horses rested. "Now I know that sometimes what looks like the end of one path is really just the beginning of another, a better one." In the distance, Spirit's soft nickering carried on the night air, as if in agreement, a reminder of the wild spirit that had refused to be broken, the wounded girl who had refused to give up, and the miraculous bond that had healed them both.